regulations didn't allow the plane to land in Naples. It was redirected, and the flight did land in Rome. It was a very fascinating kind of parallel here to see the multiple industries that have this attention concept. So that self-awareness that the airline itself, the airliner itself, did not meet the regulations for a safe landing in that airport, redirected its flight. Very similar to that car with the tumbleweeds going by. And we see we can apply these same ideas extensively in medicine as well. So especially with clinical trials and also patient engagement. And this idea of attention also has this long distance interaction. So it may be that peptides are, very distant in terms of the actual protein, but the interaction because of the folding could be significant. And this kind of attention mechanism is very useful in those types of studies. So I just wanted to kind of center us here. Attention emerged in 2014, and again in that neural machine translation, French and English, and that was kind of when it first emerged, and didn't really come into our focus until the research that was done at Google much later on in 2017. And basically looking at the survey studies in medicine of the LLMs and the mllms. If you follow the articles themselves, you'll see that the ability for the models to actually to keep up with the kind of tests that we do to see how to apply the models or where to apply the models is often very lacking. But we, in our discussions as a team working on these projects, we say, we can't keep pace. The authors and the scientists can't keep pace with the rate that development is occurring in that field. So kind of the idea was to build a test harness that would be able to quickly evaluate and even create a domain specific model itself, large language model itself. So we've been following that very, very closely. Now, in terms of R, the Elmer package, I'm sure you're all or many here are familiar with, and that one is a package that provides a programming capability, a programmatic interface to the large providers, or I think it's about 17. There's a Git repository that is available, and this is under active development. And they support a wide variety of models here. And I put a short list there of the ones that are studied. Now, it's just interesting to look at those number of model providers and then to go back into the medical literature and to look at which models have actually been surveyed in the medical literature, and you'll see that it's a much smaller subset. And one can imagine that we're constantly trying to catch up with that. So it's an area where we see specific development that can be done in the work that we are doing with the FDA in terms of the ADAM data set generation, the descriptive literature that is provided or required in the electronic common technical document format in the submission, such as description of the ADAM data sets, which I'll share in a bit here, and also some of the other requirements, documents that are required for successful submission, such as a analysis data set reviewer guide, the reviewer guide that is required with each submission. So kind of to automate that process. And we've been looking at that. And also we see that the adoption of the agents in the FDA and regulatory is actually starting to use some of these ideas of using LLMs to assist in their work. So it's just kind of background, but it's also very important. Now the one of the important areas that I worked on in 2014 and 2015 was in the undiagnosed diseases network, and the model there, the clinical model there, is really well suited for this kind of integration with the large language models and interfacing that in a patient-centric manner, not only with the clinicians, the hospitals, but also the pharmaceutical manufacturers and the sponsors of these studies. Yeah, and of course the patient as well. So that I think is worthwhile to look at that model that was used to implement that network in the right around 2014, I believe, is when it was approved. And currently today, I think they've have diagnosed about 838 previously undiagnosed diseases, and those maybe about 7,500 patients or participants in the program. And what I like about that one is there's the 21st Century Cures Act, and the Cures Act has built into it this idea of interoperability between the various technologies and the API that would then support that, so that uh, any person with essentially a device like a telephone would be able to share their electronic record, health record, with anyone. And those, I believe, right now it's about 800 and some odd hospitals that are connected that way, and so the data is available uh, to not only have patients gain access to larger groups for support, but also for the clinicians and the scientific researchers and the manufacturers to improve the quality of the product as it goes. So it's very it's really important to understand that that Cures Act is a critical component to having a large impact with R in this R medicine space, yeah, with regulatory, because we align to what the information requests require of us in our submissions, but then we also make that available to anyone through these acts that are now the law. Now, that universal API is not, it's most developed in the billing area, and in some of the scientific areas is something that is a focus and something that continues. Uh, it's important to note also that data is fair, so that's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That is actually the statement within the law, that interoperability is the key item. And I think of the top, let's say 10, or let's say of the top 7 EHRs, I think probably 6 of the 7 already have this capability integrated into their devices, so something like an iPhone or through their health app, you could access these capabilities with your physician, with your personal physician. And it's a patient-centric model as well, which is very important, because oftentimes people want to participate, but they don't realize that they can participate. And we really have a capability to make to make access very equitable into these various studies. Yeah, so with the R Consortium, the FDA pilots, and these started basically in 2021. We're now on pilot 5, and this is the dataset JSON in R, and we've just completed part 1 of that project, and that basically is evaluating the earlier CDISC pilot for dataset JSON, which is the new, and I should say not yet mandatory, but kind of under review at the FDA, data exchange standard for submissions. Now, if you look at that list, pilot 3, where we did the atoms and the TLFs in R, these were XPTs based, and the outputs were then submitted through the electronic common technical document gateway, and we went through the full review and with the FDA, and they did approve of each of the parts of it. So that was then built upon, extending into pilot 5. So we're about ready to start part 2 of that pilot. And in part 2, I believe you'll see a lot of what I'm discussing here begin to emerge. Just yesterday, I did receive invitation to build those domain models in the 3 largest cloud providers. So for research as well. So that's something that's very important. So building upon what we've already have taken through the regulatory process to then expand that into with the FDA, with the regulatory part of this. So that data set JSON and R, we did go ahead and complete the part 1 of that. And with that, we're looking at a smaller subset of data sets. So this, well, I think I may have jumped a few. Hang on. Yeah, I just want to make sure anyone that would want to see those links, you could go to the FDA and read those links as well. So using this idea of attention, then some typical outputs that would be in summary. One of the data sets that we generate is the ADSL ATOM data set. This is the subject level analysis data set. And this is a key component of our studies. And it basically, the purpose is to provide the subject level metadata, the supporting analysis and traceability. And we use this data extensively with the monitoring the various effects during the studies themselves. So we can actually generate these descriptions using an associative attention, and then just without having to take 3 months or 2 months to generate a template of a guide that would then be submitted as required materials for regulatory in the study itself. So it's kind of assistive to the clinicians and scientists that are working, but also working in parallel with other industry teams that may be doing it slightly differently. And so it's nice to see the different viewpoints at work. ADLBC is another one. This is basically the lab data. And it's amazing to see just how clear the response is, and how the correctness of the response, but also from the bioresearch quality standpoint, we don't update these descriptions frequently, mainly quarterly. So the overall approach there, and that's just something that in this context is, we don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but one of the more complicated or complex aspects of the architecture to do this at a very large pharmaceutical involves the internal and external data management. If you have a company that has 200,000 suppliers, and you have to potentially interface with any one of them regarding a specific ingredient related to a study and a submission, that architecture is extremely complicated. So I did mention that that private-public partnership that is involved with the work beyond just the study that's done with the FDA. So to actually implement in an enterprise fashion these automations is a significant hurdle, but it's one that we in the beginning we took an approach to do it vertical by vertical. That is, you would go do it maybe first in process knowledge and understanding, I'll say, or immunology or hematology or neurology, whichever, and then transfer that to the other, let's say 38 or 39 verticals. Well, that turned out to be a very long, slow process. And the approach here is to do it once and then release it to the enterprise with the original external data management articles that were already developed in 2018. So it extends and accelerates all teams at once. So that's important. And I don't talk too much about that in these slides, but that's something that is very, very critical to the overall work. And that doesn't come through typically in a sponsor. The specific sponsor will have a business organization that will interface directly with regulatory, and that's been the focus here in the our consortium studies. One of the larger sponsors has kind of taken on that responsibility of handling the submission, and the other team members, we do have a validation step that we do to take the make sure that all of the conditions of conformance are met with the submission. So additional data sets that we are involved with is ADAS, and this it is a Alzheimer's study, and this was the original Lilly clinical trial that was picked up by CDISC and developed in their 2008 through 2015 studies with the FDA. So that history is very rich. I did have this slide where I showed the R Consortium pilots, but it's a good idea to go back to the 2006, June of 2006 is when Lilly released that initial pilot data. And that data has been used not only in all of the pilots from 2007 through 2015, but then also in the more recent 2021 through to the present with the R Consortium. So the R Consortium, we're really looking at the R, implementing these R programs for the regulatory submission. And that wasn't the earlier studies with the feasibility studies with CDISC and the FDA were just trying to streamline that process. And I think if you looked at the fourth, like for example, I believe on average, a typical submission in page wise is between 10 and 20,000 pages of documents. So, I mean, with like a pilot 4, you could make that a paperless process using a web interface. So there's quite a bit of interest in that as well. So that's something just to bear in mind. So the pilots have had a very large impact. Now, some of the TLFs that are generated to support it, we generate for them primary demographic, and these are and these are available not only in kind of manual, but also using a web interface with Shiny is from some of the earlier pilots. But the idea that we're kind of moving towards is using this capability with attention to generate these automatically. And then rather than look at, spending a week or per data set or whatever, a few days per data set, and distributing that work across teams, just basically training the to allow the models just to generate that for us, and also in a time sequential manner. So something like a Kaplan-Meier survivability plot, rather than taking summary data and then generating that, just having a dynamic real-time implementation of that with the data as it emerges in the study. That hasn't been the focus of the way we've done it. We've always divided the data. This is the summary. Then you guys are going to, the teams are going to go back and create these various kind of sort of like POCs, proof of concepts, using the guidance from regulatory back to the sponsors, back to the large pharmaceutical sponsors, to try to accelerate that process, and also to try to encourage or accelerate adoption of the technologies. So, I mean, ECTD was mandated, at least 5 years ago, and the adoption has been very slow. So this kind of thing is meant to accelerate that as well. Other outputs that we generate, I think the Kaplan-Meier plot is the graphic. So very interesting to look at that also out in the publications, you'll find using large language models to generate the clinical trial tables and figures, the TLFs. But these papers do not use attention per se to do so. And some of that capability that is used is to utilize large language models and their capabilities to generate the code that would be required to generate the plot. It's a different approach. So also looking at that and extending it through Google's 2017 landmark paper on attention and how that's applied. So, like I said, was very happy for Google to invite into their research cloud. And I think the core focus is to create the domain LLM with the intelligent automation of the TLFs, the atom generation, and then any descriptions that would be required with the review from regulatory. And typically the way it works is the regulatory kind of lays the groundwork of what would be appropriate in terms of the submission itself for the project. Then, and it has to be based upon what the standards organizations have already provided to the industry. So we follow the implementation guides of CDISC. And of course, we review what we're going to do with CDISC before actually implementing it. And they did say, yeah, that's so are represented by members from all, the major sponsors within pharma.
There we go. You're
And
back now.
yeah, thank you. And so and then what happens is the FDA then will respond and review with information requests. And then the team then meets and responds to the information requests. And then within the GitHub environment for our consortium where the projects reside, issues are created, and then the team will, basically go in and work on the issues. And the GitHub has a major impact on this, not only in terms of automation, but also in terms of the project management component, and I would say the overall quality component as well, given some of the action workflows that are available in GitHub itself. So, and with that, you can get with GitHub, I mean, you can go all the way down to, get verifying the tool chains, which machines were used, et cetera, within the various sponsors. So, I mean, it's a very secure way of doing the work. And so that would be the main focus there. And that's kind of the discussion items that I wanted to talk about and present today. So any kind of follow-up or questions would be welcome.
And folks can just unmute to ask their questions, or can also put them in chat and I can read them out.
And I'll just while anyone's typing any questions, the as I mentioned yesterday, I did find out, or did receive the invitation about joining the cloud research teams for the three major cloud providers. So as that, there will be follow-ups to this as that work is fully implemented, and it will be open source, so that everyone could see it and uh, have full availability to it. So, but was very happy about that because that's we've had to go a long way with the various pilots uh, from the cloud providers that they see the value of it, and also with the advancement with attention. Now it's so interesting to look at the medical education process and to see now that training these large models starting in 2020, by I think it was 2023, the core models were already more advanced than even the most highly trained physicians in the world. So it's something where, and that's, using the tests that are used to evaluate physicians today. So, I mean, the capabilities there that can be leveraged to accelerate change and also drive compliance and quality are very significant. And I think that the approach has been and will remain that it's assistive, in the sense that in some cases, there have been studies where it is shown where if the model does the diagnosis and the physician does the diagnosis, if they work together, the actual uh, correctness or accuracy of the diagnosis actually diminishes, did it separately versus the model does it separately. So combining that idea of assisting the human, I think it may be in some ways, in some tasks, may actually be more advisable to have the machines actually do specific tasks because they just simply do it better than we're capable of doing it, and more accurately. So that's been another fascinating area, and those studies, a lot of those are just coming out now, where we're able to see that the approach has always been intelligent automation, where we're using an assistive approach. But I think with some of the areas where the models actually are far superior and consistently so, and there would be a diminution or diminishing effect to an assistive approach. I think you'll see what will happen is that the diagnosis will be uh, from the model. It's interesting to also see that the number of primary care physicians is dropping dramatically, uh, not only in the US, but across the world. So the number of trained primary care physicians that will be available, let's say in 10 years, one could reasonably expect that machines will do that work. That initial diagnosis will be done using these models in association with a physician. So that's an interesting aspect to it. Yeah, and the slides will be shared, yes, and the links to the GitHub as well. And everyone is welcome to join that as well. And like I said, when the work is completed with cloud research, that will also be available to the public domain.
Robert, I don't know if you want to share any links in the chat with folks, or if there's anything you want me to put in the chat for folks to learn more about your work here. But feel free, or let me know if there's
Yes,
something I can post.
thank you so much. And I think I'll send the slides. Should I send the slides to you or someone from the
Emily? Yeah, someone from our from the coordination committee will we'll reach out and we'll get all that stuff organized.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
But if there's a GitHub link or
Thank
anything else like that you want to share with folks, you can do that in the chat now.
Okay, and there's so we have links for the website separately from the study itself, separately from the FDA submission. So what I'll do is now, so pilot 3 is completed. Pilot 5 is still in progress. So what I'll do is with the slides, I'll append a final page where I include the 3 links, the website, the actual work on the atoms and the TLFs, and the submission. The third GitHub repository would be the submission itself to the FDA, including all of the responses from the FDA. It's fully public. In fact, it is the first fully public submission that has been done in the world. So it's in, I mean, there are other, like for example, Novo did one with R around the same time as Pilot 3, maybe a week or two before they actually submit it. But the data is private, so no one can see it or can see any of the supporting. This is fully public. So I will share those links. And Pilot 5 is the same way. Also, I should mention Roche also has done one as well. So, hats off to those two companies. And the only problem is they're private, so you can't see what was submitted. So, but this you get to actually see, and you get to actually see the FDA responses. So that getting that response from the regulatory gives us great insight, because I mentioned that ELSA, that agentic LLM that's used at FDA. So what was going on at FDA was each of the the CBER, the CDER, and also the radiological center, they each had their own GPT. And what happened in some of the streamlining just in the recent weeks actually has been that the CEDAR, the CDER GPT was the one that was selected to become ELSA. So so it's kind of streamlining that process, and I'm sure then that will serve the entire regulatory group and as it gets built out. So the hope there is that as the FDA communications continue back to the industry, that the industry will then provide solutions that will then build up that automation and streamline that process so that it's because I mean, when we would get information requests, some of the next meeting would be, okay, we have to wait for 3 weeks. Well, we could really streamline that and kind of accelerate that entire process. And in some cases, just eliminate clinical studies because of the capability with attention to just say, well, we have enough here. We could actually randomize, determine ourselves which is the best way to go here. So the potential for acceleration is significant. I think that's as far as up to now. I think that's pretty much it. We're in pilot 5. We're right now. We've wrapped up part 1, gone through the QCs. We did run all the TLFs, and it matches versus, let's say, SAS or XPT based versus dataset JSON. The dataset JSONs do validate, and that's a tricky business. But I think the next step would be to again, that would be driven by the FDA in consultation with the R Consortium and Linux Foundation, and also CDISC, since they were the ones that had the original study, and they have the implementation guide that is actually the operative document. That the next step would then say, okay, well, how can we intelligently automate some of that process? With the Atom data sets, with the review guides, and with the some of the descriptive documents. It was very fascinating to hear some of the feedback from the FDA, and you'll see it in some of the IR responses, the information request responses, that some of the biggest problems in review comes from some of the most amazing like copy and paste errors are apparently one of the top handful of problems in regulatory, which is just fascinating. So it's something where this kind of mod using these LLMs can greatly address those kinds of issues. And that's right now for now. I think a future one might be to talk a little bit about that internal external interface to the large sponsors, because that's a very not only from the medical standpoint, but also from the technological standpoint of how that is done securely would be very worthwhile for an R medicine presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Robert. I just checked in with my organizing cohort. We're going to go ahead and stop the recording unless we got some other questions that folks want to get on the recording. And